Systems and social partners hosted a webinar on social behaviour change to reduce risky sexual behaviour amongst the youth and create awareness on the prevention of statutory rape. This after horrifying statistics were released on the number of teenage pregnancies in the country. So the webinar revealed that 70% of teenage pregnancies during the COVID-19 pandemic were not planned. Let's speak now to Nkeletseng Tsetsane, who is an activist and founder of MB Teen Lifestyle, on some of the information that was shared and what solutions came out of that webinar. A very good evening to you. Thanks indeed for joining us. So, 70% of teenage pregnancies during this pandemic unplanned. Why?
Good evening, Griselda, and good evening to everybody else. I think as we start off our conversation, I think we need to call it for what it is and use the right languaging. You know, this is something that I emphasize greatly in the webinar to say teenage pregnancy versus statutory rape, right? You know, in a country where the age of consent is 16, so we can't call a delivery by a 10-year-old as a teenage pregnancy. You know, so but answering your question, you know, talking around the issues of why. There's a number of reasons, and particularly in the context of COVID, is that one of the things as activists that we have been emphasizing on is the fact that these young girls are stuck at home with their abusers. You know, we live in a country that is the rape capital of the world, you know, so the kids now no longer have that escape that they usually had by going to school or the parents going to work and so on. Another reason is access, whether we want to accept it or not. I mean, there's a whole lot of data that shows that during the pandemic, all other things took a backseat, including access to contraceptives and SRH services. So those are just two of the many intersecting issues that brought us to where we are right now.
That was actually my next question relating to access and, you know, how COVID-19, the stricter lockdowns that we had impacted on that. I mean, are we failing young girls? Very interestingly, you know, when the Full View producer Kamagwini had sent us information on this interview, I read just distinctly about when you spoke about statutory rape and teenage pregnancy. I mean, how much of a crisis are we dealing with when we talk about statutory rape in South Africa?
Oh, I think, Griselda, the stats, I mean, when they're saying 35,000 girls between the ages of 10 and 17, for example, giving birth, in a country where the age of consent, and I keep emphasizing that consensual sex can only be had by those children that are over 16. You know, the high numbers, I think I was looking at the 2018 stats, and we were looking at about 3,500 10 to 14-year-olds, you know, that gave birth. You know, I don't see a 10-year-old consenting to sex, you know, even within the confinements of the law, where it says that sex between teenagers, you know, particularly with the 2-year age difference, is decriminalized. But how does a 10-year-old consent to sex?
I mean, what interventions here are needed? You know, we often have these conversations, but, you know, to be more solutions-driven, I guess, as a country, would probably get us on the right track. What interventions did you find in that webinar that would be able to deal with some of these challenges? I think there's a lot that we spoke about and we continue to talk about and we try to advocate for, you know, but we're talking about more information sharing and advocacy. I mean, we abandoned a whole lot of advocacy programs that spoke to prevention, not only for teen pregnancy and rape, but also new HIV infections. You know, we're looking at strengthening parent-child relationships. Whether we want to accept it or not, in most families, sex is still a very uncomfortable conversation to have. So how do we empower parents to have those conversations, you know, through the parent-child communication trainings?
engaging religious and traditional leaders. You know, what are they doing in the spaces? South Africa is a predominantly religious country. You know, how are we engaging our religious leaders to utilize their platforms to, you know, as platforms of engagement, of information sharing, of advocacy, you know, but also empowering the teenagers with information and knowledge to make smart decisions. We kind of run away from the fact that teenagers are experimental in nature.
Yeah.
So our responsibility is to continue to bombard them and empower them to make smart choices.
Nkeletseng, we never have enough time, you know, to chat about many of these pressing issues that we face, but we do appreciate your time on the program this evening. Thank you very much for joining us here on The Full View. Nkeletseng Tsetsane, who's an activist and founder of MB Teen Lifestyle.